Good evening, all the joinees. Hi, this is Ansu. I welcome you all to the webinar conducted by NGEN Markets. By the time the others join in, let's have a look at today's webinar topic. So today we would be focusing on how we could build model portfolios using NGEN Fund Score as a basic parameter. Now, before creating the model portfolio, we would rather look upon what does NGEN Fund Score stands for, how did we arrive at this NGEN Fund Score on the platform, and how can you instantly create a portfolio from the Compares tab using this NGEN Fund Score. Secondly, we would be looking after certain portfolio analytics parameter, specifically the asset allocation of the entire portfolio, on the basis of which we create a benchmark, the reference index that you could see against each of the portfolio when you run a portfolio analysis. Additionally, we would also be looking upon the drawdowns tab, which lets us see now on a portfolio level, how is the portfolio recovering from any loss that has happened in the past. Lastly, we would be looking about the various reports that could be generated onto the platform. Firstly, the PPT, the PDFs, the share links, and the client links, the reports that you could share across to the clients. And lastly, the quorum would be open for a Q&A session. You could either write down your queries in the chat box or unmute yourself to raise them. So let us begin. So this is our NGEN Markets landing page. Now, before creation of a model portfolio, as I mentioned, we would be looking upon the NGEN Fund Score and explanation towards the NGEN Fund Score. So for that matter, let's say I search a fund right here. Maybe let's say I search Motilal Oswal as a fund, Motilal Oswal Mid Cap Fund. So this is right here. I click on that. And this is a fund score that you could see when you load a single fund analysis. Next to the name of the fund, you could see this black tile. You simply click on that and it gives you explanation for the fund score as well. Now here you see for this fund, Motilal Midcap Fund, the fund score is to an extent of 8.62. Now this score ranges between 0 to 10. The explanation for the score range is also something that we have mentioned. The score ranges between 0 to 10, and more closer it is to 10, we say better is the fund score of that specific fund. Now the parameters that we consider while giving these fund scores are two broad parameters, quantitative parameter and qualitative parameter. So under quantitative parameter, there are two parameters that come into use. Firstly, the AUM, and secondly, the returns and volatility. Now, when you say returns and volatility, we consider short, medium, and long-term returns and volatility. Short equivalent to 1 year, medium equivalent to 3 year, and long equivalent to 5 year. Now, what is the weightage that is given to each of this parameter? We given 10% allocation to the AUM of the fund, and the remaining 90% is distributed between the short, medium, and long-term returns and volatility. So it is equally distributed that way, meaning we give 30% weightage to short-term returns and volatility, the remaining 30 to medium-term returns and volatility, and the last 30 to long-term returns and volatility. So as I mentioned, short equivalent for 1 year, medium for 3 years, and long for 5 years. Now, these two were the two quantitative parameters. There is also one qualitative parameter, which happens to be the age of the fund. Meaning, a fund which is comparatively younger would have a lower fund score when we compare that with an older fund. Basically, because these younger funds would not have experienced the swing or the market movements that the older funds would have experienced. And for that reason, the younger funds would have comparatively lower fund score. And one another important feature of this fund score is that these are comparable intra-category only. meaning you can compare the fund score of mid-cap funds with the other mid-cap funds only. The score of a mid-cap fund cannot be compared with that of a large-cap fund. So these are comparable intra-category only. And for an ease access of peer comparison, we have provided the list of all the mid-cap funds right here itself. When you simply click on this black tile for any of the fund, all the peers will also show up. Along with that, its specific fund score will also show up right next to the name of that specific fund. Now, here the best performing fund happens to be Motilal Oswal Midcap Fund. And the second best performing happens to be Kotak Emerging. And additionally, the HDFC Midcap remains the third best performing. And also, one more thing that we could see is that this fund score is changed on a month-on-month basis. Just a minute. So here you could see the latest fund score that is there. If you just require to see the previous fund score for each of these funds, you could anytime hover on this dark blue line chart and you could see the fund scores for each of these funds for their respective previous months. Now, since we have got an understanding on this fund score, let's go to the fund section, filter out certain funds based on specific parameters and create a portfolio out of it. So I go to the funds tab. Here in the screener section, we have this filter categories as an option. Let's say we require to select only a specific type or specific categories of funds. You could anytime do that right here. Once you click on filter categories as an option, 4 buckets show up. So these are basically the asset classes, SEBI classification. Let's say from these asset classes, I select flexi cap category, followed by that, let's say a large cap and also small cap category. Additionally, from the debt, let's say I select liquid funds and also conservative hybrid funds. Just a minute, it seems someone is unmute. Just give me a moment. Yeah. So selected the entire category that I am looking upon. Now here, let's say I'll also select one sectoral fund, which is, let's say, banking. So I've selected in total 6 categories at the moment. Recap.
Sure.
Just a
No. Now we.
So I've selected in total 6 categories. Once that is done, you could see the entire list of funds right here in this screener section. Now, what we could do is typically input basic filter parameters right here. So we can filter out this list of funds that we are currently looking upon. So let's say I input the minimum AUM as maybe 2,500 crore, meaning I want to see only those funds whose from these categories whose AUM is 2,500 crore and above. And I'll simply hit on apply. Once that is done, let's say I also add in a minimum age parameter. Let's say I add in 5 and I say I wish to see only those funds that are 5 years and above, meaning 5 years and trading, and I hit on apply. Please make sure that any data that you input in this apply filter section, once you input the data, you need to click on apply to ensure that it has taken into effect. Now, just a minute. Next, what you can also do is filter this list that you're looking upon based on AMC as well. We have a AMC filter as well available on the platform. Let's say you want to look upon only 3 or 4 specific AMC related fund. You could anytime do that. Currently, I wish to see the funds from all the AMC, so I wouldn't select any specific AMC as such. Now I have list of all these 6 category funds, which has been filtered based on its AUM and based on its age. Now what you could do is take the best performing fund based on its NGEN Fund Score to the compare section. Now how could you do that is you simply click on this compare icon. Now, how do you arrange these funds based on this fund score? You could anytime click on this column heading. Now, these funds that you're seeing are currently arranged on the basis of NGEN Fund Score. And how could you determine that is because it has been highlighted in blue. This column has been highlighted in blue, giving a notification that the data that you're seeing has currently been arranged on the basis of its NGEN Fund Score. Now, let's say I just want to arrange this on the basis of AUM. You would see that this column now gets colored as blue. So that is an identifier which lets you see on what basis the columns has been arranged right here in the fund section. Now let's take the funds to the compare tab. How do you do that? You simply click on the compare icon. Now the first category that we are looking upon are large cap funds. In large cap funds, the best performing fund happens to be iPro based on its NGEN Fund Score. It has the best fund score in that category. So I'll simply click on this compare icon written shown towards the left of the name of the fund. You click on that, you get a tick arrow showing that it has gotten moved to the compare section. Next, I move on to the next category, which is flexi cap funds. And here, the best performing fund happens to be Parag Parikh. Again, you click on this compare icon and it has gotten moved. Now, the next best performing category happens to be conservative hybrid based on its NGEN Fund Score. Now, when we look upon conservative hybrid fund, it says iPro regular saving fund is the best performing. Now you could either go forward with this fund, but I would rather take up some fund from other AMC because I already have iPro as an AMC. I would like to go forward with some other AMC. So the next best performing fund from this category of conservative hybrid happens to be SBI conservative hybrid. I'll click on this compare icon. So as of now, we have covered 3 categories: large cap, flexi cap, and conservative hybrid. Followed by that, let's move on to the liquid funds. Now, here as well for liquid funds, the first 2 best performing funds happens to be iPro and SBI. You could either go forward with these funds. I would go forward with a fund which is not there in the compare section, meaning the AMC is not there in the compare section, and that happens to be this Sundaram liquid fund. So as of now, we've selected 4 categories. Followed by that is the small cap fund category, wherein Nippon small cap is the best performing. And then we are left with the last category, which is the sectoral banking. And for sectoral banking, I'll take this SBI banking and financial service, which is the best performing, second best performing in that specific category. So we've selected 6 funds from 6 categories, and then we move on to the compare section. So right here, you could see 6 items have gotten moved to the compare section. Now, before creating this into a portfolio, what we could do is look upon its overlaps, which is this tab, position overlap tab, to make sure that the overlap is well within the limit for these funds, out of which we are planning to create a portfolio at the moment. So I move on to this overlaps tab, and here we could see the overlap is well within the limit, meaning the maximum it has gone is still this darker green, 28%. So here we have given this color coordination mentioned right above this matrix structure. So it says that if it is within this darker green section, meaning within 48%, within 40% is its overlap, it is well within the limit. As soon as the color keeps on getting darker, meaning this yellow, pink, or red for that matter, decision needs to be taken to keep either of the 2 funds that have a higher overlap. Now here as well, quickly, I would just show what you could see in this overlap once you click on this percentage tile that you see. So I've clicked on that 28%. So this shows you the common stocks between Parag Parikh Flexi Cap and iPro Blue Chip. So it says that both these funds have these many stocks in common, meaning Parag Parekh has HDFC Bank to an extent of 7.98%, and IPRO as well has HDFC Bank to an extent of 5.78%. Now, the minimum out of these two is mentioned in this overlap column. And the accumulation of this comes up to be what we see right here, 28%. And that is also shown on this style section. Now, since I'm confirmed that the overlap is well within the limit, I can just go back to the main list and there's this option called as convert to portfolio. You simply click on that and this gets saved in the compare section, which is available in the portfolios tab. So now we move towards the portfolios tab, which is the second last tab. Now, since this portfolio was created from the compare tab, it would be available in the compares folder. How do you locate it? Simply collapse all file and select right here from compare. Just click on that. So this is something that we just created. Compare 46, the date and the time when you had created this portfolio. You could anytime rename this portfolio as well. Let's say I'll just rename this. Now, how do you save this name is you'll have to click on enter to ensure that the portfolio name has been saved. So I'll again collapse this entire portfolio tab that you could see, click on from compare, and this is the portfolio which I just renamed. I'll simply click on this drop down icon and I'll hit run. Now we go forward with a detailed portfolio analysis of these funds that we had shortlisted on the basis of NGEN Fund Score. Now here you could see what all are the schemes that is there in this portfolio. And additionally, one important feature is that since this has been created from the compare tab, since this portfolio has been transferred from the compare tab, all the schemes in the portfolio would be equally allocated. But anytime you have the flexibility to change the weightage of each of the scheme that is there in the portfolio. How do you do that? Simply click on this edit save as an option. You could manually edit the weightage that you see, enter the weight that you want against each of the fund, and ensure that you either update this or save this as new. So I do not wish to make any changes at the moment. So I'll just click on cancel. And here there's an option called as start and end date. Meaning, let's say you want to run the analysis of this portfolio for the past 5 years. You simply click on change and you can go 5 years ago. Let's say you have a custom date in your mind. You could anytime click on this custom date section, input the time period for which you want to run the analysis for this portfolio. So for now, I want to run the analysis for the past 5 years. So I'll click on 5 years ago. So you see the start date has been automatically picked up to 17th September 2019. And the end date would automatically be the last trading day. Now here we move on to this asset allocation tab, which is the very first tab on a portfolio analysis. So in the asset allocation tab, the first tab that we come across is this overviews tab, which lets you see the split in terms of equity, debt, or any other component that is there in this portfolio. Additionally, you can also see the total exposure that is there towards this portfolio. Meaning, ICICI Bank has an exposure to an extent of 5.46%. Now, where does this exposure come from? We've also given the detail for the same. You click on this I button. So it says that there are these 4 schemes that are a part of my portfolio and they have held into, or rather they have ICICI Bank as a stock in their portfolio. That is the reason my portfolio as a whole is getting an exposure from this stock. And here we show total exposure that is there, meaning to an extent of 100%. So if you like scroll down, you would be able to see very minuscule level of exposures as well, like 0.13. That level of exposure is also something that we show. And where does this exposure come from? That is also something that could be seen by just clicking on this I icon. Now here, as I mentioned, the asset allocation lets us see the split in terms of equity, debt, or any other component. And based on this asset allocation, the platform suggests a nearest benchmark, which is what we call as a reference index on the platforms. Now, for this portfolio, the platform has suggested reference index 4 as a proper benchmark. Now, what does this benchmark stands for? You could go to this engine section, search for reference indices, simply click in this gray section. So here, reference index 4 stands for 70% Nifty TRI and 30% CISL bond. Now, as I mentioned, this is something taken up based on the asset allocation of the entire portfolio. The platform currently is suggesting reference index 4. You could go forward with any other reference index. For that matter, let's say you want to benchmark it against any broad based index. You could anytime do that. Let's say you want to benchmark it against maybe a Nifty 500 or a Nifty 100. You could anytime click on that. You go to the performance tab. You could see how is the portfolio performing against the benchmark that you have selected. Now, for the purpose of the webinar, I'll just keep it to what it was, which is reference index 4. Right. I again go back to the asset allocation page. So this was the overview tab, which is letting us see the overview of the asset allocation of the entire portfolio. Next, I move on to the concentration tab. Now, this tab lets us to see the equity market exposure of the entire portfolio. So here we could see what is the percentage of large cap, mid cap, and small cap stocks for the entire portfolio. Now, how did we arrive at this 7.6, 16, and 37? Is a simple split of this 62% equity. The equity being split into large, mid, and small cap is something that you could see in this concentration tab. Now, what does this 38% constitute? Everything other than equity that you could see in this overview tab. Meaning, if you add up this debt 29%, cash 5%, foreign equity 2, and others 0.68. If you add up everything other than equity, it would come up to this 38% that we see in this others section. Now, this split that we are seeing is something as a percentage of the total portfolio. Now, let's say you want to see this only as a percent of equity exposure, meaning we are rebasing the entire equity exposure to 100. Then, how would be the split in terms of large, mid, and small cap is something that you could see right here. So, this happens to be the large to an extent of 60%, followed by small to an extent of 27%, and mid cap to an extent of 12%. This is when we consider the equity exposure to be at 100. So we have given that toggle option to view this exposure as a percent of total portfolio or as a percent of equity exposure. Followed by that is this equity sectoral exposure that you could see, meaning letting you see which is the equity sector that is heavily weighted towards the portfolio. So here a graphical representation is something that you could see, suggesting at the moment banks as a sector is heavily weighted towards this portfolio, followed by finance as a sector. Now, within these sectors, which all are the stocks that have exposures is something that we also show. You could click on this bar graph. Once you click on that, on the right, you could see that these all are the stocks that have an exposure towards this portfolio. And the exposure is to what extent is also something that we show. This could be seen in for the top 10 equity sectors as well. Now, this was for all the equity sector. You could view that also if there are any debt underlyings as well. So there is a separate debt tab, which lets you see the credit ratings of the underlying debt securities, AAA rated, AA rated, sovereign rated bonds. Along with that, you could also view the average maturity as well as the average duration and the name of these debt securities and the percent to which they have exposures, underlying exposures towards this portfolio as well is something that could be seen in this asset allocation debt tab. Followed by that, we move towards the drawdowns tab. Now, this tab is something that lets us see how is our portfolio recovering from any loss that has happened, of course, from the time period that we have set in. Now, on a portfolio level, we show top 10 losses. So here you could see the loss is to an extent of 28%, wherein the NAV of this portfolio was at 111.74. Now, how did we arrive at this portfolio level NAV? So, this is a weighted average NAV or weighted average price, if at all we say, meaning the NAV of each fund is multiplied with its weightage in the portfolio. And that is how we arrive at this portfolio level weighted average price. Now, what does this say is that the NAV of this portfolio was at 111 and this started falling and it reached a price of 80 rupees. Now, when did this drawdown or downfall in terms of its NAV happen? That is also mentioned right here. 21st February 2020 was the start date and it fell and it happened to fall till 23rd March 2020. So if at all we see near about a 1 month time period, the NAV of this fund kept on falling, basically the COVID period. And post this end date of 23rd March 2020, it took a total of 154 days for this portfolio to recover, meaning 154 days to cross this start price of 111.74. Only then we could say that the portfolio has completely recovered from this loss of 28.3%. And it also shows when did the recovery happened. 23rd October 2020. This is the date when the recovery happened, meaning on this date, the NAV of the portfolio crossed this start price. That is the reason this date has been mentioned as the recovery date. Now, let's say we want to verify this, you could anytime view that on this line graph as well. So the white region shows the recovery phase and the gray region shows the drawdown phase. Now, let's say maybe we focus on October 2020 as a section. So I'll just zoom in this specific section. So maybe near about this place, 23rd October. Yeah, right here. So if at all you see, I've kept my cursor on this 23rd October 2020, which says the price next to it. 112.07, which is higher than that of the start price. And that is the reason this date has been mentioned as the recovery date, because this has crossed our start price. So that is how we arrive at this recovery date. And this, as I mentioned, is available as on for top 10 drawdowns on a portfolio level. Now, if at all we look upon the days to recover for this portfolio, so maybe we could just ignore this 154 days to recover because that happened during the COVID period, which was like a one-off event. If at all we do not look upon this date or this loss that was experienced, at max, this portfolio took a total of 58 days to recover, meaning you could say that you can stay invested into this portfolio, and based on its historical performance, at max it has taken 58 days to recover from any of the losses that has happened in the past, of course depending on the time period that is under consideration. So letting you see, or rather mentioning that you can hold on to a portfolio based on its days to recover if we ignore this COVID phase. Now, this was the portfolio analysis that you saw on the platform. Next, we come upon the reporting options, which is a PPT and a PDF. So I'll show the PPT first. So you can anytime generate a standard percentage based PPT or an amount based PPT as well. So this is a standard PPT, which is a percentage based PPT. The first page letting you see the top holdings and top exposures, top 10 holdings and top 10 exposures. Followed by that, we could see the overall asset allocation, the split in terms of equity, debt, cash, or whatever are there. Followed by that, the next slide shows us the equity market exposure, the large, mid, and small cap. Now, since when we were doing the portfolio analysis, I had kept it as a percentage of entire portfolio. Sorry, as percentage of entire equity exposure. That is the reason that has come up in this PPT. You could anytime change this as percentage of total portfolio, then take a PPT download, and this is how it will come. As of now, I had kept it as percentage of equity exposure. That is the reason only large, mid, and small cap has come up. The others section is not there. So you can anytime change that and then take the report. Followed by that is the sectoral exposure, equity sectoral exposure, and the debt exposure. Banks, as I mentioned, has the highest exposure towards this portfolio. Next, being the performance chart, letting you see how the portfolio has performed against that of the benchmark in a graphical manner, as well as the statistical data is also something that is provided on the right to it. Next happens to be the rolling returns tab, letting you see how the portfolio has performed in various rolling windows. 260, 520, and 780 is something that gets generated by default, which are anytime editable on the platform. And finally, the drawdowns tab. And PPTs on our platform are editable that way, meaning you could add in slides or remove in slides as well. Now, this was the first reporting option. The second reporting option is a PDF. You can anytime have a watermark of your organization and simply click on Create PDF. So this is a portfolio level PDF. First page showing you the portfolio performance against that of the benchmark, the yearly performance of the portfolio. Then comes in the asset allocation, letting you see the top holdings, top exposures, asset allocation, AMC exposure, letting you see which AMC is heavily weighted towards your portfolio. Followed by that, the equity market exposure and the debt exposure, if there are any in the portfolio. And lastly, the rolling returns and the drawdowns tab. So this is the portfolio level PDF that gets generated. We also have two links option that could be shared with your client as well, a share link and a client link. Now you click on this share link. So here there are few options that you could see. Hide NGEN Fund Score, that is an option. If you do not wish to show these fund scores to your clients, you can anytime do a tick on this checkbox. And you also have an option to lock the start date and the end date. So I've just clicked on this to lock the start and end date. And here the link would be active for a maximum of 7 days. You could reduce the number of days as well. That is possible. So once that is done, you simply click on create. A link gets generated. So this link, you could share it across with your clients as well. Meaning your client would not be having a login of NGEN Markets. But by sharing this link, they would be able to see the exact same portfolio analysis that you as an user could see on NGEN Markets platform. All the tabs on this portfolio level is something that you could see when you share this with your client. So since we had locked the start and end date, there is no option to change them. And as I mentioned, the maximum time period the link could be available is 7 days. Now, this was the share link. We also have another option, which happens to be a client link or rather a mobile link. So since this is a mobile link, there are specific features or specific tabs that would be available to be viewed. So this is a preview of how it could look like when you share it with your client on mobile. Basic details of the portfolios, the exposures, how has the portfolio performed, the analytics against a benchmark, and the markets data. Additionally, if the client requires to input any data, they could type in a message and it would be received on your respective email ID. The one that is registered on NGEN, that is something that you would receive it on. Now, how do you share it across with your client? You just need to input a PIN, click on create client link. So this is how the link will get generated. Simply you can copy this link and share it across to your client and they can instantly have a mobile view of their portfolio on their phones. All right, so that is it for the topic related webinar. If anyone has any query, you could either unmute yourself or type down your queries in the chat box.
Hello. Hi, so there's a question in the chat box which says, can you give a quick recap orally of the process after selecting the funds, going to the compare, and after that going to portfolio? Sure. So typically once you've um taken the funds, you then typically go to the compare section. I mean, by clicking on add to compare, funds get added from the funds section to the compare section. You see that small icon which lets you take funds from funds section to the compare section, right? So one by one, once the funds come in the compare section, what you typically need to do is just have a look at the overlap once, position overlap, which lets you be confirmed that there is not a lot of similar holdings in the portfolio that you're about to create with these funds, right? That is one final check before proceeding and clicking on that convert to portfolio option, right? So you click on the convert to portfolio option. The moment you do that, a portfolio will get created with a default name as from compare whatever number, uh, right? Because we're creating this portfolio from the compare section. After that, you need to go to the second last tab on the platform, which is the portfolio section. From there, you need to locate the from compare folder. So there's a from compare folder right there. The moment you click on the plus icon, the latest created portfolio will be visible right there. Number one thing is that you can rename it by clicking on the drop down, click on rename. And then once you've done that, click on run, right? That's how you run a detailed portfolio analytics on a portfolio that you've just saved or rather created using NGEN Fund Score. All right, there's another question. Can you show from where you created or selected the mobile link option? Sure. So when you click on a portfolio for analysis purpose, after you click on run analytics, and once the portfolio analytics runs completely, some options come at the top, right? Which is called client link. That is where you create mobile links of the portfolios of the clients to share across on a mobile screen of a client. So this is a mobile optimized link, right? You can generate a random pin and create a mobile link for the client's portfolio. Once you do that, the preview, what you can see right now on the platform on the right hand side, that is how it will show up when the clients click on those links once generated. Optimized for a mobile screen, of course. We have another share link option, as Ansu has already highlighted, that typically lets you generate web-based link. So these are optimized for laptop screens, desktops, and so on, right? You simply click on that share link option. This is how the link gets created. You copy this link and you share it across to the client's email, SMS, whatever. Once they click on that link, this is how the analytics will show up on their systems. They will not have access, of course, to NGEN Markets. However, they can view their own portfolios using this share link that you've shared. All right, there's another question in the chat box which says, similar to manual data for MF, is it possible to upload direct equity shares related data from NSDL and do analysis? Yes, of course. So the NSDL statement, right? If you upload the NSDL, it will also have the stocks, because NSDL statements are, of course, pan linked, right? So on NGEN Markets, we capture mutual funds and stocks. So if there is a ECAS which has only stocks, right? So it will capture that way. And in a similar manner, what you can then do is, once you upload the ECAS, you come to the portfolio section, you click on the plus icon, follow the same process, load statement analyzer, and load in the ECAS by simply clicking on that plus icon, right? So this is just an example that we are showing, because in this portfolio, there is a mix of mutual funds and stocks, but this is how it will look like if there are only stocks, right? So stocks will get captured with a unique different icon. The blue icon that you can see, right? That is an identifier for stocks. So that's how you capture stocks portfolio. So there's another question. No, so ShareLink does not um, require a separate subscription model unless you're, of course, an institution. But for mutual fund distributors and IFAs, ShareLink is embedded into the license cost. Yeah? And there's no separate charging for ShareLink. Any more questions? Please let us know. Okay, there's another question in the chat box which asks, can you compare an old portfolio with a new portfolio? Yes, absolutely. For that, we have compare to portfolios tab right there at the top in the portfolio section, right? So you load one portfolio, typically the older portfolio on the left-hand side, and the newer or the target portfolio that you're trying to suggest to the client on the right-hand side. With that, you can compare two portfolios side by side. There's another question which asks, what's the strategies tab? Yes, so we are working on introducing some template strategies. That's a new development with a new version of NGEN Markets. So that is currently under beta version. So currently we are working on that. We'll let all the users know once this is released full-fledged.
If you have no more questions, Prajakta, Ansu, you can point out.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Go ahead, Ansu, please close.
Yes. Thank you all for joining in. Hope this was helpful. You could anytime visit our YouTube page. We have a dedicated playlist with all the webinars that have been conducted up until now being uploaded onto this playlist. So a total of near about 128 YouTube videos have been uploaded up until now. Today's video will also be uploaded by next week. Thank you all for joining in. Hope to see you again next week with a new topic. Thank you.